And we'll start with the quarterback position here for week number 4. Not exactly the most sexy list, and the guy that you should be looking for, he just misses the threshold. We usually talk about guys that are rostered in 65% of leagues or fewer, is Jared Goff. He's at 66%. He's had a very good matchup this week against Seattle. Hopefully he has a Mon-Fri St. Brown, so you'll see him in the story on CBSSports.com, but not on the list because he just misses the cut. These are the guys that you should be looking to add. Mariota, Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill, the 3 that can help you this week. Maybe Zach Wilson, maybe Jacoby Brissett, and you see Brian Hoyer's name there. That's really just for Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues because you should be adding any starting quarterback that becomes available, and he's expected to start for Mac Jones. Let's talk about Marcus Mariota. Yet to score 20 fantasy points in a season, and Heath, I know you like this stat because he's averaging over 30 rushing yards per game. It's kind of skewed a little bit because of what he did in week 1, but still does have 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. Can we trust Marcus Mariota in week 4 against the Browns? But really more long-term, can he become a streaming option for fantasy managers probably in 14-team leagues? Who likes or dislikes Marcus Mariota?
I like him okay. They're at home. They're against the Browns defense that we don't know exactly who they're going to have healthy. But
that's true.
I don't expect it to be the full complement of Browns defenders. This game surprisingly has, I think, tied for the second highest over-under on the slate at 50.
Really?
5 points higher than Patrick Mahomes versus Tom Brady. So Vegas is expecting a lot of points. I think Mariota's been just a little bit unlucky in terms of his production, so I like him in that 21-point range as a low-end starter this week.
I mean, I'll give you the case against Marcus Mariota. He's averaging 26.3 pass attempts per game. His touchdown rate is below 4%. 72 of his 92 rushing yards came in week 1, so he's not running as much as he did in week 1 over the last 2 games. But if there is no Myles Garrett for Cleveland, it changes the tenor of the game completely, and it does make me think a little bit more about Mariota. He wasn't at the top of my list, but if there's no Myles Garrett, then I could buy into him as a 1-week option.
You got Matt Ryan versus Ryan Tannehill head-to-head with the Colts and the Titans, both coming off strong games. Ryan, 18 fantasy points, and Tannehill has scored actually 20 fantasy points in 2 of 3 games so far this season. The one where he didn't do it was at Buffalo in week 2, and that's arguably the best defense in the NFL, or at least among the top defenses. So which of the 2 guys you like better, Dave? I'll start with you.
I like Tannehill a little bit more just because of what you said. The 20 points in 2 of 3 games, it means that he's finding ways to be productive, and the Titans are a resourceful team. And the Colts typically have a predictable coverage. They usually play a lot of cover 3. They didn't do it against Mahomes, but I think they revert back to it against Tannehill. And Tannehill has some great success against cover 3 coverages, including a quarterback rating of over 100. So I like Tannehill better than Mariota. That'll change if we know for sure that Myles Garrett doesn't play. But I think that he's someone that fantasy managers could gravitate toward as a streamer in week 4.
I slight lean Ryan over Tannehill, but there's nobody who you might have as your starting quarterback who I would start one of these guys over.
The nice thing for Ryan is that we saw in week 1, he was basically a touchdown shy of having a big game, threw 50 passes in the comeback against the Chiefs. Week 2, lost his receiving core. No Michael Pittman, no Alec Pierce. Gets those guys back in week 3. Very tough matchup against the Chiefs. Backs to the wall. Comes out and plays much better. Was a turnover away from being over 20 fantasy points as well. Had the fumble in that game. So we'll see what things mean for Matt Ryan with a healthy group around him. I do think these 2 guys have the opportunity to probably be better than Russell Wilson, though that's the thing, based on how things have gone for him through the first couple of weeks of the season. So it could be a pivot play for you if you have Russell Wilson on your fantasy team. Just real quick before we move on from the quarterback.
Sure.
In a Superflex 2 quarterback league, there is a guy now available in Brian Hoyer, rostered in 0% of leagues. In this situation, we don't really talk about this so much. How much fab do you spend on that type of guy, knowing that he's not going to be very good, but is a starting quarterback with the bye weeks coming up?
Did you draft Dak Prescott and Mac Jones to be your quarterbacks, and you're really stuck and you need a warm body to fill the position and you can't make a trade? Then I think you've got to spend at least 15% of your fab on Brian Hoyer, and I feel sick just saying that. And I'm also curious, you didn't mention Geno Smith among your quarterbacks this week.
Yeah, Geno Smith should probably be in the conversation.
I think he should be in there. He's had better fantasy production than Tannehill, and he's taken on the Lions. They've allowed at least 22 fantasy points to a quarterback every week this season. So to answer your question about 15% on Hoyer,
maybe in a 2 quarterback league, but in a super flex league, I'll just start a running back or wide receiver.
True, it's a fair point. Yeah, Brian Hoyer might be a little tough to trust, and you're somebody who just spent 100% of your fab on Jimmy Garoppolo, so that's where you're at. Jameis Winston, Justin Fields, 2 quarterbacks you can move on from. Winston might be benched. We know what Dennis Allen said. That might be a pivot play if you're looking to get ahead of something, picking up Andy Dalton, who's at roster at 1% of leagues, and Justin Fields. They just don't let him throw. It's very, very puzzling.
It's got to change at some point, right?
I mean, they're 2-1.
Why?
They are 2-1.
They're going to be 3-1 next week.
They could be 3-1 next week. So
they got to cut them loose a little
bit. The formula is working. Why change it if you're the Bears? Hopefully it does change, though, for fantasy purposes. All right, let's move on now to the running backs and the players that certainly matter here. And again, You're not going to see the names on this list, but in 10-team leagues or shallower, maybe some shallow 12-team leagues, you might find Jamal Williams, who's at 70%. You might find Alexander Mattison, who's at 71%. Clearly, you want to pick those guys up, but they should be in the same conversation with Khalil Herbert, who's got a great opportunity without David Montgomery there for who knows how long. Samaje Perine is worth adding, at least as a handcuff behind Joe Mixon, but certainly if Mixon does not play in Thursday's game against the Dolphins, he would be at least a flex option. J.D. McKissick has done a nice job catching the ball the last 2 weeks, hasn't done a lot with it, but still in PPR leagues could matter for you. And then some deeper league guys to roster right now. Jaylen Warren looked great on Thursday night. Who knows what happens with Najee Harris if he goes down. Craig Reynolds and Treston Ebner, I think I'm saying that right.
Yep.
Both now become the number 2 guys on their respective rosters. And Justice Hill just had 6 carries for 60 yards. Forget about Kenyon Drake. Forget about Mike Davis. Justice Hill should be the number 2 guy in Baltimore behind J.K. Dobbins. So Khalil Herbert is in the same discussion from a starting standpoint as Jamal Williams, and if Alexander Mattison were to start for Cook. Rank those guys for me, Dave.
If we know that there's no Swift, and it looks like there's no Swift,
Assuming all three of
Williams
these guys
is going to
start.
be number 1. And then if there's no Dalvin Cook, are we assuming that Dalvin Cook is out? Madison might be number 1, actually. If there's no Dalvin Cook, Madison 1, Jamal Williams 2, Khalil Herbert 3.
Yeah, they'd be right there though. Like in the projections, they're all within a half a point of each other. So it would be Williams, Madison, Herbert for me.
I would go Williams, Herbert, Madison, but again, they'd all be right in the top 15, caliber guys, and Williams for the long term, because we figure that Herbert is going to, we figure that DeAndre Swift, we kind of had the timeline from Dan Campbell that out through their bye, so week 7. We don't know the timetable yet for David Montgomery. Matt Eberflus saying that it's going to be probably day-to-day for Montgomery at this point, but how much fab are we spending on Khalil Herbert?
Man, if we don't hear anything else and it's still day to day, then I don't think you can go over 25% for Herbert. But I do think there's still a possibility he turns into a starter in the second half of the year. So even if Montgomery's out, he should be at it.
I'll be way more bullish on this because I think Herbert could be the better running back, and there is a chance that it could be a significant injury for Montgomery. We just don't know which way it's going to go. We don't know what Matt Eberflus is as far as talking to the media, how much he wants to reveal. I like Herbert's style, and I think he fits in with that offensive line a little bit better than Montgomery does. So if I'm desperate for a running back, Jamie, I'll spend 50% of my fab.
The thing that's frustrating is that Montgomery just had his best game in week 2 and had this unbelievable matchup that clearly Khalil Herbert exploited. So kudos to him.
He's got another one in week 4.
He could have absolutely another one, especially if Leonard Williams remains out. We just saw again the Cowboys have a monster performance with both their guys, and Khalil Herbert looks like he's headed for 20-plus touches. All right, if there is no Joe Mixon on Thursday because of the short week, the fact that Zach Taylor said he should be fine, at least we have to believe that as of now. But if for whatever reason Mixon can't go Thursday night, where do we think of Samaje Perine Heath? Should he be a must-start guy or more of a flex play?
He's a probably start guy. He's a low-end number 2 running back, definitely behind Williams, behind Herbert, behind Madison if those guys are starting, but someone in that Clyde Edwards-Helaire range of running back where you're probably starting him based on how all the other guys are doing right now, but certainly not a must-start.
I think he's absolutely a low-end number 2 fantasy running back if he gets that opportunity. But we got to wait and see if he gets that opportunity.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to what you have on your roster. So this is one of those things you're going to probably maybe overspend for Samaje Perine, but somebody that even if you do put on your roster and he does not start Thursday, he should be stashed. He's one of these handcuffs that's on what should be a great offense. We saw the potential of it against the Jets, and he came in, scored a touchdown, worked in the passing game. 2 of 3 games now where he has at least 3+ catches, so we know they like him in that role. So not a bad guy to have on your bench just in case something happens to Joe Mixon down the road, if in fact Mixon is fine as expected. Some running backs to move on from for this week, guys that just don't necessarily have the opportunity, I think, to help you. Raheem Mostert, 2 of 3 games, 8 or fewer carries, and we just don't seem like the Dolphins want to run the ball very much. Darrell Williams, we said to Adam last week with the hope of James Conner being out, so if you want to stash him in that regard, fine. But as we saw when Conner was back, he's back to the 3rd guy behind Eno Benjamin as well. And then Kenneth Gainwell's been mostly frustrating. He only has 3 catches on the season, so his role in the passing game isn't there. I just don't see him having a prominent opportunity as long as Miles Sanders is there. Any of these 3 guys you consider stashing, knowing what their teams are looking like right now?
No, but I'm sure there's going to be some point this season we come back to Gainwell. And it'll probably be the same week when Miles Sanders goes down with an injury.
Yeah, I don't feel any need to hold on to Williams or Mostert.
I will hold on to Williams. There's one league that I'm in, deep rosters. I've got James
Sure,
Conner.
I mean,
so I'm going to hang on to him there.
There are plenty of scenarios. If you're the James Conner manager, if you're the Chase Edmonds manager, if you're the Miles Sanders manager, you might want to handcuff these guys. But in a vacuum, these are guys that you can move on from. Certainly for Khalil Herbert if he's available, and this is the only player to drop. All right, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, going to get into the wide receivers and tight ends that matter to you, and hopefully will matter to fantasy managers long term. Romeo Doubs, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones. We'll talk about a lot of receivers coming up next here on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by Snickers. Rookie mistake? Maybe you just need a Snickers. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. We're talking about the waiver wire moves you should be making at wide receiver and tight end for this week. And let's start with the wide receivers that you should be adding. A couple of names at the top of this list that could end up being must-start options, certainly in 3 receiver leagues for week number 4, coming off strong performances, not just in week 3, but for some significant stretches so far this season, mostly in terms of Zay Jones and Greg Dortch. But Romeo Doubs finally stepping up as the best Packers receiver. Heath had that as a Believe It or Not on Monday's show. I'm sure he still believes it. For Tuesday's show as well, you got George Pickens, Isaiah McKenzie trending in the right direction. Michael Gallup on his way back. Josh Palmer, Tyler Boyd, KJ Osborne as very capable number 3 receivers on their respective teams that have shown you the ability to be starters at points this season. Kadarius Toney we're speculating on, same thing with Russell Gage and some other options at the wide receiver position that could help you in some deeper leagues. Let's start with Romeo Doubs, first receiver for the Packers this season to have at least 8 targets, the best performance for a Packers receiver so far. Heath, yesterday he said he's going to be the best Packers receiver moving forward. Dave, do you agree? Is this the number 1 receiver in Green Bay?
It is until further notice. It could change once Christian Watson is healthier, once Allen Lazard just picks up more targets. But Aaron Rodgers is a guy that needs to trust his wide receivers. We've seen it year in and year out. And it's easy to say when he's got Devontae Adams on his side that he trusts him. He threw at Romeo Doubs 8 times. Doubs caught all 8 of them. He had a great target share. His yards per route run was over 2. I think he's going to end up being somebody who's a factor for the Packers moving forward. And there's no one right on the doorstep of taking him off the field. Sammy Watkins is out for 3 more games. We don't know when Christian Watson will be back. I think Doubs is absolutely worth 20% of the fab at minimum.
Lazard's really the only one that scares me. I don't think, like Christian Watson, we talked about it with rookie wide receivers, how hard it is to earn Aaron Rodgers' trust. And Watson's practiced with Aaron Rodgers like 5 times since he got there. So I really don't think Watson's going to do it anytime soon. It's just, does Lazard eventually get back to 100%, which he doesn't seem to be right now, and then starts earning more targets. I still think it's close enough between Doubs and Lazard that I'm not ranking Doubs as a must-start wide receiver yet, but someone I absolutely want to add. And if he gets 8 targets again this week, he'll be a top 30 wide receiver moving forward.
And it could be like what Patrick Mahomes told us with the Chiefs. We also saw Robert Tonyan get 7 targets in the game, so he's starting to get a little bit healthier. Lazard might still be working through the ankle injury. I've said this a few times the last couple weeks that he just might not be right. And we saw last week he missed some practice time. The running backs really haven't done the things we were expecting them to do in the passing game through the first 3 weeks of the season as well. So those guys could obviously take a bigger share of what Aaron Rodgers is going to feel a little bit comfortable with. But what we saw from Romeo Doubs in a tough matchup, let's give him credit. That Bucs defense is amazing. And for him to perform like that as a rookie, he could be on the rocket ship to becoming a must-start fantasy receiver rest of way. Zay Jones has had 2 very strong performances, 12 PPR points in week 1, over 20 PPR points, 24 PPR points in the week 3 upset against the Chargers. Heath, when you look at this, we all made a lot of jokes about Christian Kirk and the money that he got, and Zay Jones wasn't far behind given the production that he had as a player prior to coming to Jacksonville. But Trevor Lawrence is playing great. Doug Peterson's offense is fantastic so far. And this guy might be a little bit overshadowed. Only 8% of leagues is he rostered in right now. I think he's going to be the most added player on CBSSports.com.
He should be one of the most added players for sure. Now, I'm not confident that he's going to be kind of like Doubs. In fact, less confident that he's going to be a starter than Doubs. It was just 2 weeks ago he had 4 targets and caught 3 passes for 27 yards. So this game against the Eagles, and it feels like Vegas is kind of the same way. The Jacksonville only has an implied total of 21. Yeah. Not quite buying all the way into this offense yet. If they look this good against the Eagles, then we're going to feel a whole lot different. Go add Jones, sit him on your bench, let's see what happens.
The best part about Jones is that he's going to be a cheaper add than Doubs. Everybody's going to go after Doubs. He's Aaron Rodgers' number 1 receiver. That's going to be the narrative, and he might be. But we're going to see Zay Jones continue to see a lot of target share. He had a better target share, better yards per route run than Doubs did in Green Bay. And you talked about Trevor Lawrence. He's looked incredible through much of the season so far. I think Zay Jones has staying power.
I think he does too. Just a matter of, can Trevor Lawrence keep this up, or is the Jaguars just, kind of going through the Chip Kelly, motions of our offense is surprising everybody, and then teams start to recognize it and they sort of take some things away. Zay Jones could be one of the things they take away, which could open up Evan Ingram, maybe Travis Etienne. Obviously, Christian Kirk has been fantastic, but Zay Jones off to a great start, so should be added certainly more leagues than 8%, which his roster percentage is right now. And Greg Dortch, we keep saying, okay, he's not going to keep this up. He's not going to keep this up. 2 games with at least 9 catches. The targets have been there for him. He's been fantastic. And Rondale Moore, who knows when he's coming back, and now you have A.J. Green banged up with the knee injury. Is Greg Dortch a must-start fantasy receiver in a great matchup against the Panthers?
He is. I think he absolutely is in a PPR league, and you can even consider him as a low-end flex in non-PPR, and he's going to be readily available off the waiver wire. Another inexpensive buy for fantasy managers who don't want to put in the chips on Doubs, or maybe if you don't believe in Zay Jones, You've seen it now with Dortch pretty much every single game this season. He's gotten good volume. He's given good production. The question I have is what happens when DeAndre Hopkins comes back? I think this whole offense could change considerably when that happens, and that could hurt Dortch, but that's not for 3 more weeks, Jamie. So we could still see Dortch help fantasy managers out for the next few games for Arizona.
I would rather start him than Zay Jones this week. I think I'd rather have Zay Jones for the future than Greg Dortch.
Yes, I totally agree with that sentiment 100%. So we'll see how things go for Dortch. And again, we don't know the status of Rondale Moore or A.J. Green, but if both are out, he's the number 2 option, certainly in the receiving core, but maybe even ahead of Zach Ertz at this point. So wide receivers to move on from here. Guys, you see this list. Is there anybody that you think is a must stash, knowing that Mooney just not getting the targets? Claypool might get replaced by George Pickens. Shepard's easy because he's out for the season now, but Robbie Anderson and MVS.
No, I think these are all very droppable wide receivers.
Is it bad that other than Shepard, Mooney is my least favorite guy on this list right now?
So frustrating.
But
Where does he rank in terms of bust for this year?
He's up there. Absolutely.
Yeah, if he'd been drafted just a little bit higher, then he would probably be the top bust, because I don't have any hope that it's going to get any better anytime soon. Like, there's going to be a week where he catches a 50-yard touchdown pass, but I don't have any hope that he's going to get 6 or 7 targets even on a regular basis.
And I said it before, when it comes to Mooney, he's getting open. He's doing his job. It's Justin Fields and the offensive line and the offensive play caller in Chicago not doing what's best for Darnell Mooney. They're doing what's best to get wins.
The one that makes me the most nervous, obviously, is MVS, because he's on the field so much, and he does have back-to-back games with 7 targets. At some point, he's going to hit a big play from Patrick Mahomes, but it's just not going to be consistent, and that's the biggest issue for him. And the same thing with Robbie Anderson. Had the big week 1, and the last 2 weeks has been largely frustrating for him.
He's part of the reason why DJ Moore is struggling, by the way. I think Baker has eyes for Robbie a little bit, maybe a little too much.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like in week 3. I know it sounds crazy, but it's what I saw.
Just get DJ Moore going, please.
Please.
The waiver wire options at tight end. Here are the players you should be looking to add. David Njoku, Tyler Conklin. Njoku coming off an amazing game with 9 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown against the Steelers. Can he keep it up? And Tyler Conklin, the number 3 tight end in fantasy. Let's talk about those 2 guys here. So, Dave, you're excited about Njoku to open the season.
Yeah.
And he went from a miserable game in week 1, did have 5 targets in week 2, and then comes out with the 10 targets in week 3. Was it just a matter of Jacoby Brissett getting more comfortable with him, and this was the slow build to what, not this on a week-to-week basis, but clearly something where you can consider him a starting fantasy tight end?
He's a low-end starting fantasy tight end from week to week until he starts to get below 5 targets per game. He's had 5 targets each of the past 2 games. He's not going to score every week. It was surprising that he did as well as he did against the Steelers. That's a team that's usually great against tight ends, but they fed him enough and he scored. It's good. You can feel fairly confident in him against the Falcons in week 4.
I wish Kevin Stefanski would have said something other than, well, the coverage is going to dictate each week how many targets he gets and how involved he is, because he was he had 5 targets in week 2. That was fun, but he still had 6 fantasy points. Like, 5 targets per week is not going to make a fantasy starter. Njoku, I feel like I'll add him, but I don't want to start him. I'd rather use Conklin even with Zach Wilson.
Well, that's a great point. And let's talk about Conklin, because the quarterback change could be a problem. We've seen Joe Flacco average 51 pass attempts per game. He leads the NFL in pass attempts. So basically everybody has been involved on a week-to-week basis, including Conklin, who has 3 games of 7 or more targets. Is that going to continue with Zach Wilson? Really, that's a bigger question for Garrett Wilson, for Elijah Moore, for Corey Davis, for all these guys. Can Conklin keep this up?
Well, in terms of whether or not the Jets suddenly become a run-heavy team because Zach Wilson's the quarterback, I don't think so. I think their defense is bad, and I think their offensive line has some issues as well. Breece Hall looked great last week, and I wonder if they try and feed him the ball a little bit more. I don't know how efficient he'll be. I think they're going to end up having to throw a lot. But what I've seen with Zach Wilson is that he likes to fire downfield. He doesn't want to get rid of the ball as fast as he can. And he can avoid pressure a heck of a lot better than Joe Flacco can, because he's young, he's mobile, and all that stuff. So I'm nervous about what the target volume will be like for all the short area pass catchers in New York. I think it goes down for the running backs, and I think it goes down for Conklin too. So if Zach Wilson's the starter in week 4, I'm going to be nervous to use Conklin, but if I'm streaming tight ends, he's probably the 2nd best guy on the list.
We do have the report that Micah Fitzpatrick is dealing with the concussion protocol. No TJ Watt. If Fitzpatrick is out, that's a great situation for Conklin, though.
It's a great situation for Zach Wilson and the whole offense. Talk about a soft landing for his first game. That worked out pretty perfectly. I will say, like, a lot of this with the Jets offense is how many fewer passes are they going to throw. But Conklin's not just a product of the volume. He has a 16% target share. That's 2nd on the team behind only Garrett Wilson. Like, he's getting more targets than Elijah Moore and Corey Davis right now.
The other thing to keep in mind is, and I don't think it's going to be an impact, but CJ Uzomah has been missing a lot of time due to injury. How much will his return sort of change things a little bit. Just something to keep in mind because they did add both these guys this offseason. Uzama more of a blocking tight end, Conklin clearly more of a receiving threat. All right, some tight ends you might be moving on from and guys that were drafted as starters. We told you to avoid these guys, certainly at their cost. Dawson Knox, in a game where Josh Allen threw 63 pass attempts, only 4 targets for Dawson Knox. It's just not there for him right now. And Mike Gesicki has the touchdown in week 2 against Baltimore. In his 2 other games, he had 4 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown against Baltimore. His 2 other games, he has 2 targets and 2 catches. Any reason to hold either one of these guys, Knox being the one that's clearly rostered in more leagues?
Kind of like Knox this week, but it's a Jobu week. If he doesn't get it done this week, you can't trust him at all. And if you've been running with him for 3 weeks, you might as well try him one more time against a porous Baltimore secondary.
I will just say, like, if he has one of those games where he gets 4 targets and scores 2 touchdowns, that shouldn't make you feel any better about him next week. Like,
no.
it's just
No,
like,
you sell.
will he randomly happen to hit this week? He's not going to be a reliable fantasy option.
Think of him as a streaming tight end, and if you've already got him, then maybe you don't have to go bother finding another tight end to stream.
And again, we'll see what happens. Hopefully this is the week where he delivers, but I can't imagine when you have guys like Conklin, who's, again, proven himself. You have some of the other tight ends that we've been talking about. I mean, even Robert Tonyan for me. I'd rather have Robert Tonyan than Dawson Knox heading into their matchup against the Patriots.